Yeah. Oh my
See,
goodness.
You mic'd up?
it's bittersweet in a way that the agents are being financialized
I
because
know,
on
right?
one hand it's like great, so we just push the adoption.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you just don't want to get started.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's go.
See, don't do this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
So
I
you have to
know.
We got to turn up the other Brandon.
take your authority
Oh,
There we
perfect.
go. That's perfect.
There you go.
pretty tricky.
Well, we're going to change
It
things
is.
up a little bit. We're going to take a little walk down memory lane here
Yeah.
with Hedera. It's been a wild ride for those that have been around for a long time,
Oh,
all the Age
okay,
Barbarians out there. It's been a wild ride. There's been a lot of really fun stuff that's happened. But we're just going to kind of go through some of the highlights. But to start off, let's just go through and do some introductions. We'll go ahead and start down there at the end.
Brandon Davenport, Director of Communications for HGraph, and so happy to be at HederaCon.
Hi, I'm Miguel. Hello, everyone. I'm a product engineer at the innovation team at IO Builders. Yeah, big thanks to Hedera for the opportunity, and yeah, thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Greg from Hashgraph, been with the ecosystem since 2018, and before we go any further, I just want to give a big shout out to Ryan, who's been under the weather today, and he's doing a stand-up job.
Legend.
Well said, Trooper Ryan for sure. So we're going to start this off. We're just going to go through some time frames in the Hedera history here. The first one starting off is going to be the vision of Hedera. Starting, in 2017, people maybe started to read the white paper. We had things like the Hedera launch event, probably the biggest event that we've had up until this point. We had all kinds of really interesting things happening during that time, all the way up to the announcement of the first governing council member. So we're going to go through some of that time frame. Just to kind of give you a heads up, Brandon's going to give us some feedback from a community perspective. Miguel is going to be talking about things from a developer's standpoint. And Greg's going to give us some things that were kind of going on in the background. So during this vision phase, when they were laying out what Hedera would be, we certainly got excited. I know I did when I saw that launch event. It was very well done, letting us know what this was going to look like and how it could change things. And I know a lot of people got really excited. Greg, kind of during that time, what are some of the things that popped out to you?
So, for me, I came into the ecosystem without knowing much about crypto, if anything, other than what you read in the news. And you refer to the white paper. I just fell in love with the consensus algorithm, with a hash graph. There was a bit of black magic there that, as a software developer, a software engineer, I just fell in love with, and that's what sucked me into the ecosystem. I had no choice. But I have to say, when I arrived, or when I was invited into the ecosystem, into the family, the landscape was very barren. It was kind of tumbleweeds. There was no SDKs, no testnet, nothing. It was bare bones. And we're here today, 7 years on. I think, as Jim said, it's been a minute. And we've built an awful lot of stuff, and there's still plenty more to do.
Another thing that took place during this time frame, and a lot of you guys probably watched this as well, was the HBAR creation event, when they pressed the button there in a Starbucks and created the most strategic asset within our space. Can you give us any feedback on that?
So I wasn't directly involved in that period of time, but I'm aware that there was a lot of work that was done in kind of preparing what you saw on screen, that scrolling of, the building up of the network and the starting of the network. But I wasn't directly involved in it. But it was, it kind of felt like, for me, a time when we had achieved the first milestone. The network is up and running.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, Brandon, I'm not sure exactly when you came into the space, but from when you first understood the vision of Hedera, what were your thoughts?
My thoughts were just, I think that, like a lot of people, I saw that Harvard talk with Lehman Baird. And for me, it was just the ethos, the focus, and I'm not a super technical guy. So for me, it was just the vision and the approach of everything. And it was very counterintuitive to the crypto space, but like Mans was talking about up here, it's paid off. And I think that like many of us, Hedera just felt very different in many ways. And so for me, it was just kind of realizing that and tapping into that. And it just, the way it was presented just made sense to me. And I think that, very similar to a lot of people up here, you formed a connection with it. And as soon as you get involved with the community, then you can't leave. You know what I mean? So I was just here, and I'm here forever.
Oh, spending an awful lot of time on Telegram. What were some of those differentiators for you with Hedera? I know one of the ones for me was the professionalism. And you see it here at events like this. But from the very beginning, I think that was one of the big differentiators for me, was seeing that these felt like the adults in the room.
Absolutely. It was that, and then also that was translated into the community itself. And I have a specific memory where I was starting like an NFT project, like many in the early days in Hedera, and without even being prompted, there was people from Hedera, from Swirlds Labs at the time, and other developers in the ecosystem like Patches and stuff, that were coming to me and saying, hey, here's some advice for how you can improve your project a bit, or here's a resource you could get access to, totally unprompted. And it was just very different from a lot of other situations I had been in, even just coming from a music background. And so, again, that to me showed that the professionalism from the organizations did translate down and grow into the community. And so that was huge for me.
So the next phase we're going to talk about here was during the beginning of 2019, all the way up until open access. And this is when we started to see the council come together. We had conversations in some of the chat groups and the Telegram groups of, who are the kind of council members that you want to see on the council. And we would throw out different names. And I remember there were a few people that would come out and be like, hey, let's take it down a notch. We don't need to be that. If we don't hit these things, we're still successful. This council, which I know Mance said was just as important as the tech, can still be what he had envisioned. And then when we first got the initial 5 council members, we were like, wait a second, they are achieving the vision that they had. We had IBM and Boeing was a little bit later, but Nomura and Swisscom Blockchain, and we were like, wait a second, they actually are achieving this. Other fun things that happened during that time. Does anybody remember the daily timestamp? Any show of hands?
Few people.
So Greg, that was a fun thing. One of the things that I think Hedera has tremendous potential around, and now we're seeing more and more use cases come out around it, is micropayments itself. But this was a good example of how it could be done really early on. Greg, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we wanted to exercise the network, but not ourselves. We wanted the community to be able to exercise the network and show that the network was capable of handling many, many transactions per second. And so we built the daily timestamp, and for those of you who weren't there or don't know what it was essentially a news website where we had news articles, and by reading the news, you would have to pay a tiny amount of HBAR to essentially see the article. So pay-per-view, if you want, for news. And these were translated into transactions on the network. But we'd grown up from the barren landscape that I talked about earlier with a testnet and now even a mainnet. But we had no wallets, we had no browser extensions, we had to build all of that from scratch in order to make the daily timestamp work. And a little bit of an inside story, we noticed some accounts, some accumulation of HBAR in different accounts on the network, which kind of piqued our curiosity in terms of what's going on. We didn't have TRM Labs, Chainalysis, Merkle Science, again. So we started digging into the data and we started putting it into a database. Those of you who know what Miranode is today, well, that's where Miranode came from.
Understood. So leading up to open access, so that was when everybody was going to have access to be able to start to build on this network. What did that time frame look like? Obviously, you had to build a lot of tools to make Hedera be ready for all these builders to come on and start building. What did that time look like?
So, I mean, it was 10 years' time, I guess. We had a deadline. We had to be ready in time. We had to build the first integrations with exchanges, which took a fair chunk of time. And Hedera, like you said earlier, is not just different in its behavior to a lot of the other networks. The technology was fundamentally different at the time. So a lot of exchanges were kind of going, you don't have smart contracts. You have your own kind of different token, and it's not a blockchain. How do we integrate? So we had a lot of work to do in re-educating. I recall a meeting that Lehman attended with an exchange, and Lehman was essentially told, this is never going to work. You should use a blockchain instead of this hash graph thing that you've built, which was an interesting meeting. But anyway, we plowed on. We got the exchange integrations. We finished the mirror node work, which was essential to getting the integration with the exchanges. And then the launch event in itself was, worldwide, pretty big. But for a lot of us behind the scenes, even though we went and had a meal and we had a bit of a party, there was no drinks because we had to make sure that we were ready to catch any issues that crept up after the network was up and running. So very tense moments, but at the same time, huge relief when everything just worked. And I think as a team, we're all very, very proud of what we'd achieved by then.
And it did work right out of the gate, and we had high volume use cases right out of the bat. We had AdsDAX doing multi-million of transactions each day.
Prior to mainnet going open access, we had opened some sub 1,000 accounts. Again, for those of you who know, the first accounts created by members of the public were above 1,000, but there were a few sub 1,000 accounts that were delegated to projects prior to open access. So they could build and they could prepare the ground, and we could launch the network with, I think it was 15 or 20 applications, from the get-go. It was fascinating times.
So during that time, from open access to, we'll say when the HBAR Foundation launched, it was that initial launch phase where we were starting to see some growth. They were figuring out places where things needed to be tweaked, but there were some fun things that happened that I thought were entertaining to watch. So again, Matt's saying that just as important as the tech was the governing council. We saw expansion during this time of the governing council. We had some really big names join, including Google. But there was also a similar model that came out around that time from Libra, Facebook. And I thought it was nice to see that Hedera stood up for themselves a little bit and put out a full-page article saying the sincerest form of
flattery.
Yes. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
That's right. Yeah.
But it showed that they saw that model, and I think it might have been after some meetings where they were potentially going to join the governing council. They saw that and they said, if you're going to have a cryptocurrency network, it's probably a pretty good idea to have really good governance in place. And it looked almost exactly like Hedera's. Now, obviously, the legislators stepped in and said, I think this is sucking a little bit too much power into the Facebook realm. Do you want to mention anything about that or anything else during that time leading up to the launch of the HBAR Foundation that you'd want to share with the audience?
That one-page article, I wasn't aware that this was happening. In many respects, we operate internally in sort of fairly compartmentalized manner. By that, what I mean is, it's not quite need to know, but if you don't need to know, we tend not to sort of overburden each other with so much information. There's so much going on all the time that it's best to focus on what you have to do. So this came out in the news. I maybe saw it on Twitter for the first time, as I do now with many projects that come up on the. So it was a huge surprise, but it kind of felt like we'd grown up to be able to do this kind of thing, and and stand up to Libra at the time. Yeah.
Sure, fun time. So the next one is the really fun time, I think, and that's when the ecosystem really started to grow. I'm sure Brandon's going to have some things to talk about there, but Miguel, I want to go from a developer's standpoint. Maybe talk about, how the developers were interacting with the network, what the hackathons looked like, how the rollout of the EVM and all that kind of stuff went. Can you give us some insight on that?
Yeah, we are really builders, so we started with Hedera journey just with the H20 hackathon. We actually won the general competition. We adapted Hedera to work with events with a tool we call Eventium that it's now published under the Linux Foundation. So we integrated that. We created an event bridge, and yeah, that was the first touch we had with Hedera. We also on the H21 won again, this time on one of the tracks, and this time it was with a tool that's called Assetto. That was on digital asset tokenization, and that's when we see, there was an opportunity to grow on digital assets, and these hackathons make us to have a good position, to start with projects, to have really great success with projects like the Stablecoin Studio and the Asset Tokenization Studio. So, yeah, I think that was great start for us. We are building since 2020 a lot of things on Hedera, and yeah, that's our journey through here.
Yeah, the tools that builders have at their fingertips now are really impressive, and build they did during this time. With the assistance of the Hashgraph Association, the HBAR Foundation, we didn't have DeFi prior to this, but the products that have come out, the change from September of 2021 until a few years after that, and what we saw as far as growth and products in the ecosystem just absolutely exploded. Things like Karate Combat and things like Saucer Swap in our DeFi space. But Brandon, what are some of the things that you got excited about during that time? The NFT space certainly took off, the marketplaces, and seeing the entrepreneurs in our space really trying to build new products and get the rest of the ecosystem excited.
Yeah, I think for me, I'll share a tidbit that kind of summarizes it pretty well, is in the NFT space on Hedera, there's a bit of a unique situation that is like a nightmare situation in crypto where you have people buying and selling NFTs with each other through Twitter DMs. And literally, the first NFTs that I would buy, I would message someone on Twitter, they would send me the NFT, and then I would let them know when I sent the HBAR. And it was such a strange experience. This was before marketplaces or anything. And in my mind, I go, well, this is a nightmare. This is a security issue, or people aren't going to get paid for their NFTs. But there weren't any problems like that, I think, because there was so much energy and passion and intrinsic motivation in this ecosystem. People just kind of trusted each other. And entire startups in this space now were built off of doing these types of things that, quite frankly, wouldn't happen on a lot of other networks. I think that a lot of the technical advancements and qualities of this network created these unique problems that we kind of solved together. And I think that spirit of trust carries over to today, because just walking around, I'm meeting people, I'm chatting with people, and it's the same people that I was buying and selling these NFTs from on Twitter. And we trusted each other to send what we were buying and send the money after. And now, of course, we have marketplaces, we have all sorts of incredible infrastructure. But at that time, that was such a strange thing, and it was so special, and it really encapsulated like what a quirky network this is, being on the bleeding edge of so many things in so many different ways. And I think that for me was just a great way to contrast like where we had been and where we've ended up. And I just think that was a product of the quality of this. And like you were talking about, Brandon, is the maturity of the leadership and then the maturity of the community. I don't think that could have happened any other way.
So we are running a little bit short on time here, so I'm going to skim over the next topic. There was a time of transition earlier in this year where there were some things that were bubbling under the surface that were frustrating the community. And what I was really impressed with during that time is how the governing council proved that they can govern. I think it was a huge test, and they passed it with flying colors. I don't think it was easy for them to do, but they did exactly what they needed to do and made the proper changes. But now I want to move on to what we're excited about going into the future. And whenever I talk about Hedera and the things that I'm excited about, it's always the unknown. It's the Equity Lab working with NVIDIA and Intel to embed Hedera technology directly into their chips. I had no clue that was coming out, and it just hits the market. The builders are out there behind the scenes building things that we don't even know about now, but then they come to fruition and absolutely blow our minds. Things like CLSQ, we have satellites that are in orbit right now preparing for transactional Internet of Things. And you could just go down the line. So it's the things that I have no idea that they're coming, and then they just hit one day, and I get to cover them on Friday. So it's fun to watch, but Greg, what are you most excited about looking forward to the future?
So I think, like Man said earlier today, it feels like we've been building foundations for 7 years. I mean, maybe it's this year, maybe it's next year, who knows? But it feels like we are, as an industry generally, but as a project, gaining some momentum that is now kind of hard to stop. And there's plenty more momentum to build, and plenty more use cases to discover, besides everything that we've been talking about for the last 12 years, DeFi and all of those things. I'm really looking forward to, for me, DLT, which Hedera is a foundational technology that sits alongside the internet, the cloud, and all of the other transformative technologies. It's not just about finance. It's not just about money. It's first and foremost a technology on top of which we build use cases. And like you said, we are finding new use cases on an almost daily basis. And it's, that's what I'm really excited about.
It's an amazing ride.
What can we do? Yep.
Absolutely. Miguel?
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. Just when we look at the Hedera's future, we see three things. I'm not going to get too technical here, but the first one, there is some room to improve in the EVM performance. So that would be great. It will enable to build solutions on top of that first layer, as I said. That will enable also to build L2 solutions, and there's a growing need for privacy and interoperability. So with that, we can use private networks to work to talk with public blockchains. That would be awesome to do it with Hedera. And the third point here is we see that real-world asset tokenization is going to be a huge thing, and we hope, and we are with the Asset Tokenization Studio a key piece on the Hedera ecosystem.
And Brandon, we'll give you the final word here.
I think what I'm most excited about, and I think that, working, at HGraph, I think that for us, seeing our company start as an organic, initiative in the ecosystem, and now, being a growing startup and joining that team, I think that for me, seeing that happening all over the place, seeing, projects like Bonzo Finance, Hashpack, Kabila, all these different projects forming and growing their teams, seeing people moving around the ecosystem, we're seeing this become a hotbed of startup growth and idea and innovation. And so I think that for me, what I'm most excited about is the people that have stayed and the new people that are here, and seeing people move around in the ways that they could be most effective. I just think that's what I'm most excited about, is seeing everybody in such a great situation, and the conversations I'm having here really show that. So I think I'm most excited about where people are at going into this next year.
All right, so that's the end of our time. Thanks for listening here today, and